Okay, let's wait for others to join. I want to continue that discussion on the policy actions config map changes, about how to mutate credentials once they're provisioned. And actually yesterday, a new doubt kind of came up in my mind. If there's time, I'll bring that up as well. And this was about allowed namespaces actually. So really the question is, do we want to say what kind of access is allowed per namespace rather than just these are the namespaces where you can access this bucket? Do you also want to say these are the namespaces you can access this bucket in these specific ways? Oh, hi Saad, good morning.
Hello.
Hey, Saad. I know that's, is that a comment? I think there was a similar idea in one of the KEP review comments, right?
Yeah, I wrote that.
That was your comment, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think I mean it's just a question at this point. I think we should discuss and see how it goes. I want to understand better what how important that is and what that might look like. Another question that was brought up in the KEP review also was interesting. Anyway, so let's see. It's 10:04. Let's wait one more minute, and we'll get started. Hi, Vianney. Good morning.
Hey.
Hey. Where's Ben these days? He hasn't showed up this week. Does anyone know? All right, let's get started. Give me 1 second. I'm looking for the slides. Hey, does anyone have any April Fool's jokes that they want to share? Okay, so I want to start off by actually bringing up what we were discussing last week. I think the best way to do that is by going through the KEP. So one of the questions that came up last week was, do we even need to have this use case? Do we even need to address this use case of credentials having to change after the workload has been deployed with a particular set of credentials? So for instance, if a workload has been deployed with a bucket and a bucket access has been created for it, and the credentials have been mounted into the pod and it's running. Now, as this is happening, the admin decides for whatever reason that the set of credentials is too restrictive or too constrictive, or too too expansive, I would say, and they want to either restrict the access or extend it. So first question that I had was, is this a use case that needs to be addressed, just based on your experiences so far? And if so, can we address it by simply saying the admin just has to delete the workload, redeploy it with uh, uh, with a different BA, with a different BAR that asks for different credentials? Um, so let's first. So we actually came to a conclusion last week, after starting this discussion. But one thing we said was we need to kind of sit on it and have this discussion with the rest of the community as well. Um, so so that's what we're doing right now. I've had some time to sit and think about it, but with without kind of polluting anyone's ideas with the conclusion that we already had. I want to have the discussion again and see where we end up this time. So let's try and answer this question of so we're all here because we're interested in object storage, or we work with we're part of a vendor that builds it, that offers object storage as a solution. So in your experience so far, in whatever capacity, do you see that being an important use case where for a workload, for a running workload, you change the type of access that it has?
So for non-bucket use cases, I have seen kind of with secret access, secrets that need to be rotated, and in those cases, it's nice to just be able to rotate them in place through an update to the secret object rather than kind of creating a new secret and having to update the deployment.
That's a good point. So yeah, that would involve the inner workings of how the secret itself or the credentials itself is passed down to the pod. And
right.
Obviously getting the rotated credentials. So there's two things there.
So yeah. I guess you can break it down into two pieces. One is whether it requires a new bucket access, and the second is whether it requires a restart of the workload. I think for alpha, a restart of the workload is not a bad place to start, but being able to rotate or change within this using the same bucket access object, I think, would be more important.
Makes sense. So in this case, yeah, a restart. Okay, so restart might be to kind of complete that question that I asked. So we're saying this is a valid use case, and I agree with that. Not having this possibility might be too restrictive. So we're saying this is an important use case where we want to be able to change the type of access a workload has as it's running. Now the second question is, do we have to do it without restarting the workload? and we're saying yes, because for rotation cases we need that. So yeah, like you said, there are two pieces to it. One is actually getting the new credentials, and one more is whether you restart the workload or not, or how it's presented into the pod itself. So I'm thinking this through. If we were to implement it just the way secrets are implemented, like the secrets are mounted into pods today, we can dynamically update them. The problem with that, though, is there's no guarantee that the application that's using the credentials is going to use the new set of credentials. It might just continue using whatever it already had, that it has in memory, that has persisted in memory. So how do you address that?
I think that's the same problem that exists with secrets today. While secrets allow themselves to be updated when they're mounted as a volume, it's not necessarily true that the application will pick it up.
Right.
And that's just that's something that the developer needs to figure out.
Okay. Nicholas, did you want to ask your question directly?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I was discussing rotation with VNA earlier this week as well. And one thing we were wondering is, how does this relate to authentication or credentials that are time bound? As in, if we were to use STS tokens, which have an expiration for the access, then what triggers a re-minting, so you want, of the keys proactively?
So we don't support STS on purpose. So we support IAM or key based access. We don't support ACLs or STS. Those are the 4 ways you can get access to cloud resources.
Well, the benefit of STS is that they do timeout and the others don't.
But that being said, we still have this problem of rotation.
Yes. Well, yeah, it's not
right. So I just want to clarify about STS first, though. So about the problem of rotation, Saad also just brought it up. There is there's always an expiry that's set up front while requesting the credentials. Right now, we ask for credentials with no expiry on them, and all the cloud providers support it. But I would think post alpha, that is right after we reach alpha, I think this is something we should address, where the expiry on the credentials is set through the bucket access class probably, and Cozy automatically rotates the credentials for you and either invalidates the existing credentials, so that even if the application doesn't pick up the new one, it starts failing. It starts failing to have access to object storage, and we can either advise the applications like we're going to provide SDKs, so our SDKs could either automatically reload, or we could give that as an instruction to application writers saying, when the expiry does happen, you'll have to go and start using the new credentials. And the third mechanism is we just restart the pod, and whenever the pod restarts, it ends up getting new credentials anyways. Does it make sense?
Yes. Right now there's no such functionality foreseen, and indeed maybe it should not be in alpha. We'll need to figure something out soon after, because this could be a roadblock in many environments where unlimited token lifetimes are, well, basically forbidden. And it's not a trivial piece of logic to implement. And right now, I don't see where it fits.
Okay. Sorry, can you repeat that? You don't see where it fits? Like, I don't know what that means. Do you mean like, are you saying that? Go ahead.
Like in the current model, even we have a minted secret that a bucket access connects to one secret. A pod consumes a bucket access through a bucket access request. So at some point in time, there will be 2 secrets. Like when a controller knows that the previous secret is about to expire, it will mint a new one. So at some point in time, a bucket access has like 2 secrets, even though the first one is the eldest is about to be invalidated somehow, or will invalidate automatically. But there seems to be no way to store this, and if the first secret invalidation fails, well, then we would need to retry later and that kind of stuff.
I see what you mean. I mean, we can still make do with one secret. Call it, it's like an alternating secret. Let's say it has 2 fields, something like blue and green, and you start with blue, and you have a field saying blue is the current active one, and then when you rotate, you change it to green, and every time the secret changes, every time we go and update the secret, we trigger an update of the actual credentials in the pod. and it goes from blue to green and then green to blue and then so on and so forth, just alternating. That way, we only have one secret, and I mean that just seems simpler because of not having to deal with life cycle of multiple objects, even more than that we already do. That would work, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I wasn't really referring to secret objects as from the Kubernetes API point of view, just secrets as generic concepts, strings.
Oh, I see. So I mean, we could. I see the problem you're saying. So you're saying if the existing secret is invalidated first, then there is a possibility that there's an extended period of time where the new secrets are not validated yet, and the workload could go without access for a long time. If it's invalidated second, if the existing secrets are invalidated second, where the new secrets are created first, then, like you said, you have two different access credentials for the same bucket, which might be okay. What do you think? Like, if you had multiple credentials for the same bucket, it's not really a big problem, right? Because eventually we're going to get rid of the old one.
Yes, sure. I think it was a bit simpler by just today I see a one-on-one mapping of a secret as known from the object storage system to a bucket access, and we'll need to move beyond that. And the green-blue thing you mentioned, you explained before, could indeed be a solution, but right now we don't have the concept of one bucket access maps to multiple object storage secrets, so you want, at the same time.
Yeah.
So, ideally, if we look at Amazon STS, so now you can specify, I think it's 12 hours for the maximum expiration time. And ideally, we would auto-renew the STS token. So in the back, something like that.
Right. Yeah. So generally, like the way we do it is, say you get credentials, say at 8 a.m. one morning, and you get it for either like something like 25 hours instead of 24. The idea being, well, that's more meant for like actual like real users, like people tokens. The idea being, you come to office again at 8 a.m. in the morning, and you don't want it to have expired already. You want to have that 1 hour interval where when you log in, it refreshes or it rotates. So that's kind of how we do it. So in this case too, what we'll have to do is, we don't need that plus 1 hour thing, but let's say we set the we should allow the users to set how the duration of the expiry. So they could say a week or month or whatever, and at some interval or at some point of time before the expiry, we'll have to go and refresh the tokens.
From a driver perspective, it would be nice to have a new method to say, for instance, refresh credentials.
Okay.
That would return a new STS token. But transparently, you see what I mean? From the driver point of view, it should be a new method. These credentials to be refreshed. For instance, for Amazon, there is a technique to do that by generating a new STS key, So, okay, but Cozy shall manage that transparently.
Exactly. Yeah, it has to do it transparently. I mean, that's the whole point. So anyone else has any thoughts on this? Okay, so I'm going to take that as this sounds good so far. Hey, can someone remind me of what we talked about last week or on Monday? Because one of the decisions we came to, or one of the key pieces that we had to do in order to make this happen, was the idea of taking, putting the actual policies from the bucket access class, or taking it away from the config map which we have today. So currently, the bucket access class has a pointer to a config map, and that config map is supposed to hold the actual policy. But we said in order to solve the problem that we were solving, and I think I remember it now, that policy actions config map cannot work, and instead we should have the policy actions inside of the bucket access class itself. And Jeff, I believe we had a discussion about it after the call also, right?
Yeah, I think briefly, and then we wanted to just finish it up with this Thursday community meeting.
Mm-hmm. Hey, can you remind me what that decision was? Like how that started? I think it had something to do with how we allow mutation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions that was asked, I believe, was if someone changes the config map because they are mutable, and they change an access policy, what if anything does Cozy do about it? You know, we're not doing a watch on config maps right now, so Cozy wouldn't know about it, but should we? And if we did detect a change in a config map that was tied to a bucket access class, what would we do? And so it was an area we hadn't really spent any time thinking about. At least in my, maybe you guys did, but at least me, in trying to keep the KEP current, I hadn't spent any time thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. So
we also talked about the coding.
Yeah, we said we could do, just escape strings or base 64, right?
That's right. We looked at both base 64. I think there's a little bit of a leaning to base 64 is just a little cleaner, but I don't know where we landed on that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. As long as you can get the original data back. That's what you're talking about, right? Encoding, that's what you said, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So going back to what we were talking about. So it seems like there are two reasons why the credentials will change. One is a regular part of its operations where you need to rotate the secrets or rotate the credentials. And two is a manual intervention by an admin saying the type of access here should change. So let's say we have, based on our discussion so far, it seems like there is a pretty clear path to allow rotations, just technically speaking. In terms of plan, we'll get to that later. But let's go to the use case of willfully updating the credentials or changing the type of access that a workload has. Can we safely say that such a change should only be done by the admin rather than by the user?
It seems like we can defend that because the user has no say over access policy today based on the KEP, right? The admin creates the BAC. The admin creates the access policy value. And the user doesn't do anything except pick which BAC they're going to reference in their BAR. That's it.
I mean, in that sense, doesn't the user have the ability to define what kind of access is needed?
Well, this has come up recently in a KEP review by Sebastian. The user has no say in any of this in Cozy today. The BR doesn't say anything and the BAR doesn't say anything. They both reference a class resource, and the class, which is admin controlled, it defines access, it defines bucket properties, and so on. The user doesn't do anything today.
It's not very different from PVCs and PVs.
Right. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's how it is. And there has been recently some comments, and I think over time there's been a few comments about this division between user control versus admin control. And we, even when we have these discussions, we end up going back to admin control. And that's what we still have right now.
Yeah. Makes sense. So going back to this original question of, so Jeff, based on what you just said, is it safe to say that a change to the type of access that a workload has can only be affected or brought about by the admin?
It seems so to me. It's consistent with the KEP, unless we want to start discussions about some balance between the control of a user and an admin. Today, it's like I said, it's all 100% admin. And so with that in mind, what you just asked makes sense, that it would be admin only, because we're not letting the user do anything.
Yeah.
I guess where it gets weird is you're allowing a user to mint a credential by creating a bucket access request.
Yes.
And then if we don't allow them to keep access, continue to keep access without an admin intervention, that seems a little weird.
Right.
You're talking about cert rotation?
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that we really looked at that kind of rotation use case.
So doesn't this apply to, in general itself? For instance, so Saad, you're saying that if a user is the one that chooses what kind of access is needed, and if we go behind the user's back and without even informing them, we go and update the type of access the workload has, that's weird. That's what you're saying, right?
I guess what I'm saying is, if rotation needs to happen and it requires admin to do something, and kind of the user can provision access themselves, but then becomes dependent on admin input for rotation, that seems like it's kind of switching, right? It's going from the user can mint access themselves, but then they are dependent on the cluster admin to do the rotation at a later point.
I was trying to make a distinction here, saying that for rotation use cases, it has to be automated by Cozy. It has to be transparent.
I see.
But there is the use case of someone wanting to willfully go and change the type of access the workload has.
Okay, got it.
Even in that case, though, I don't think admin is the person that should be able to do that, or that should do that. It should rather be the user, because the user gets to choose what type of access they want when they request the bucket access, and any change to what kind of access the workload has to the bucket should start with the user again. Because if it starts with the admin, then it's the user is not going to know that things have changed, and it's going to be very hard for them to debug, and it just end up in a weird spot.
Sid, when you say the user gets to choose the access they want, that's within the set of access choices that an admin has made available to them through the bucket access classes.
Right. So let's say the admin has decided, all the different policies they have do not allow deletion of objects. So let's say there are 5 policies. One is read write, one is write only, and 3 more. So let's say the user starts with write only, but then later on realizes that they need read write. So the user should just be able to go to the bucket access request and update the bucket access class to point to a different class that has read write access, and that should start a cascade of changes that ends up creating either new credentials or updating access for the existing credentials that's already in the pod. Right? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and practically, you have to generate a new token. I mean, talking about Amazon, for instance, I'm not sure you can dynamically change a role.
Why not a new bucket access request in that case? Isn't to update, not just request a new access.
What happens to the old access?
Delete it if you don't want it anymore.
Okay. My question is coming from the point that will the existing BAR, will the existing bucket access request point to the new bucket access? Is that what you're saying?
I think so, yes. If the self-service intention here is to have a different access, it's read-only.
So if you're going to get rid of the old access, we're going to generate new access tokens. I mean, why can't we just do this with one, without generating the new access and just updating the existing bucket access object?
It seems nice if we can do that. So you just, for instance, you do a kubectl edit your bucket access request, and you change it to, for instance, from read write to read only, typically, and automatically it will generate new access tokens for your pod. So
I think
the credentials will be mounted in the. Sorry. Go ahead.
The problem is that most of these things are not allowing to change a class for being instantiated, and so if what we said is that the update would be to a top level field of the access request, saying I wouldn't want read only versus read write, that's one thing. But if what we're saying is let's update the class, I think this is kind of some. Well, I just don't know of any pattern like that today. Right? Most of these things do not update the class after.
But we're not updating the class itself. We're updating the bucket access request and changing the class that it points to. Classes are immutable.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, changing the reference to a different class, but the problem can be with class is that the new class is completely different, right? It's not just different, so it can be unrelated, right? For that matter, so it creates access.
Yeah.
There's some nasty things. The new class could point to a different provisioner.
In general, I would say don't. You should not be changing storage class after provisioning, or any class after provisioning. The idea of a class is it's a set of parameters for provisioning. After provisioning, you should be independent of the class.
I like that idea initially, at least. That makes sense to me.
Okay, so I'm also convinced that we shouldn't be updating the existing BA. So let's say we go with this idea of having a new BA. So the existing BA now will point to a new BA. Is that what you're saying, Guy?
Right. So I'm trying to follow the example you gave, right? Which is the user in our case would like to signal Cozy that it wants a different, right? Which is I want to change from read write to read only, and it's a user decision in that case, not an admin decision to update the workload.
Right.
And in that case, we're asking how does the user manifest that, right? So I would say it somehow relates to redeploy my deployment, right? To put my deployment again with a new bucket access request, a different one, like tear down the previous. That's how I imagine that currently. I'm not sure if it's it's really the same use case you had.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we're saying that we create a new bucket access request with whatever new credentials you want, and then you go and update the pod
On
to
template, right?
so yeah, makes sense.
Do we have any just to making sure, does it allow that the pod templates will allow updating the bucket access request reference? So if I have an existing pod template within a deployment, and then update the deployment pod template to have a different bucket access request.
So right now, it's a volume. It's an ephemeral volume
Right.
of type cozy. So
and the reference is to a side to a bucket access request, which is created before or after that
right.
deployment. Okay. So
Right.
if I need to redeploy, that means I want to tear down to move my previous bucket access request, provision a new one, and then update my pod template.
I don't know if volumes are allowed to be changed.
No, they're not, but the pod template can be changed. So pod template can mean that then you roll the update to all your pod that workload. Right?
Okay, so when the pod template changes for with the volume definition, does that mean the CSI driver gets called? Does anyone know?
The pod will be deleted and recreated.
So we're saying if you want to change the access of a running workload, it's not possible. The only way to do it is to kill the workload and create a new one with the new credentials.
Yeah, but that's a problem because so if I understand correctly, today we can dynamically remount credentials in an existing pod. So I know it's technically feasible. And some applications are able to monitor the file change, and they can automatically change their credentials.
But I think dynamically changing volumes for pods, it might be relevant for other use cases as well, which might be a different, right? Regardless of whether it's what you get through that is bucket credentials or another secret or whatever. Right?
No, but let's say you have a Spark job running 3 days, and the policy is to renew the tokens every 12 hours, for instance. It's possible to design an application that will automatically detect the credentials changes and do a seamless.
But do you really expect? So I agree, it is possible, but you're talking about rotation. I think we started from a different point.
Yeah, I know, but for me, rotation due to refresh or rotation due to any user, for instance, user wanting to so from transitioning to rewrite to read only, for instance, the same, right?
It might be similar, but the trigger is completely different, right? With rotation, the trigger is a policy or an admin.
So whether it's voluntarily or involuntarily, so whether it's a user, an admin, or an auto refresh, at the end of the day, it should be the same, no? For the
okay, but then what we're saying is that if that's the desire of the admin to provide such a policy, right, then it is to update the bucket access itself with green, blue, whatever we said. What we started in this section of the discussion, I think, was what is the user trigger that requires refresh of the access.
Okay.
Because the user cannot update the bucket access directly. What is the user is capable of doing. And I think, at least from my point of view, that it's true and any volume update. The user typically cannot update the volumes of running pods, right? It has to restart, delete a pod, recreate a pod, and have a different volume, or mount something which is completely dynamic, reread. data from that, but then it comes down to who's writing their new data and through which policy. And I think we can imagine an admin or an admin control, rotating keys, making updates to bucket access, not every night like you're suggesting, right? And then all the cozy applications will reread from the updated secret, the updated volume. That's possible, and I'm not saying to change that. I think that flow should work. But the question is, do we need any similar capability for the user to make such an update to the bucket access?
I still don't understand why we cannot let the user changing the bucket access request. So
I think the point is this: change in the bucket access request. If it's going to change a reference to a class, the entire immutability and model of having an instance from a class and knowing what that is, it's a different model from most of the other objects resources we know from Kubernetes, I suppose.
No, not to mention the other problem with that, you'll have to update the bucket access, which is the result of BAR update, to have a set of fields be different, and it kind of becomes tricky when you can't update all the fields at once.
Okay.
So
if we really want the bucket access request to have a top level capability for your user to make changes, like read only versus read, it does make sense, right? So that the user can make updates to that top level request field and get approval or rejected for the request change. That makes updating the class to make that change, and relying on an admin to provide a different class so that I can toggle between. I haven't seen that
model.
I just didn't see it yet for resources and classes. That's the only.
Makes sense. No, makes sense. So if I understand, like if I were to summarize everything we talked about, the first part is we want to transparently allow rotation of credentials. In that case, without restarting the pods, without changing the BA or BAR or BAC, new credentials are automatically, or existing credentials are automatically refreshed as soon as or right before the expiry date or expiry time is hit, and dynamically mounted into the pod, and either through the SDK we provide, or with documentation we say that, or we expect the application to start using the new credentials, because the existing ones will be invalidated when we refresh them. So I think
the update itself is an admin permit. It is an admin level update to the BA, right?
So you can repeat that.
And I'm just asking if, in that case, what we said before, this requires admin permissions to update the BA.
I'm saying it will be automated right before.
It can be automated, so requires a permission to update the BA.
Yeah, you mean privileges, but our sidecar will have permissions to update the BA. Is that what you're asking?
Okay, not the user, not the workload.
I was okay. So I was strictly talking about the refresh part of it. So there's two parts I see in this whole problem. One is automated refresh of tokens as they expire. That is to make sure that if tokens are compromised, say someone manually goes and copies a token, you don't get access for more than whatever that period is. Does that make sense? So that's the first part. That's where no user or admin intervention is needed. Automatically we refresh the tokens as they expire. That's kind of how pretty much every kind of token based access works. Like even with OAuth, you go and request a token, you get it through that multi-step OAuth process, and it's only valid for a certain amount of time. And before that time expires, if you say you visit the website again, it automatically goes and refreshes it for you, and then stores the new token in your cookies. So so that's kind of what I'm imagining with that automated refresh part.
But how does the pod know that there's a new token to use?
Good question. So there's three ways. One is we set the expectation up front through our docs to whoever the driver writer is, to whoever is the application writer that's using Cozy resources. We set up this expectation up front that if the expiry is hit, or if the expiry date comes, you're supposed to refresh your tokens, just reload the file. The other way is to restart the pod. If we forcibly restart the pod, when it comes back up, it'll come back up with the new tokens alone. When the new tokens are loaded, it'll just have the new token. I don't like that approach, because then every expiry period, pod will restart. The third approach is to rather than just documentation, since we're also giving out an SDK, Go SDK, for applications that want to use Cozy, that SDK should automatically handle it.
There's a problem with both using that SDK and the previous solution, insofar that the same token will be shared by multiple pods, right?
Yeah. All the pods will update the tokens.
And wait, the token, well, okay, which means that a bunch of replicas of the same pod, say under a deployment controller, may crash, stop themselves to be restarted at the very same time.
You're saying that because there might be a small duration where the credentials are invalid, and the access goes away, and the application is probably designed.
No, let
me rephrase that. So you're saying that because the application can restart all at once, it's not going to look like a rolling upgrade, and
exactly, because the token will be invalidated at roughly the same time, and then they will all detect this at roughly the same time, and all want themselves to be restarted at roughly the same time. So you have de facto a service, or very likely a service interruption.
Well, generally you refresh before the expiry hits.
Yeah, but then that's not the issue. The issue is that the process restarts.
Yeah, I think we can control that. We can control when the update happens. Like we can do it in a staggered fashion where it goes one by one.
But then we are re-implementing a deployment controller or replica set controller, kind of.
But did we say we're not going to do restarts for token refresh? We're not going to impose it. We're going to support not imposing token restart.
For automated refresh, we're trying to come up with a solution where we don't restart the application.
Okay, but then what we said is that the mounted volume will expose the blue and green tokens, right?
Or only one of them.
Why not both? You typically say, well, this is the green one for some amount of time, and start the SDK will start using the green one until you actually remove the blue one and promote the green to blue or something like that, right?
No, we are running in another issue, which is that all of a sudden we are pushing a Cozy specific SDK onto applications, which I'm not sure is reasonable.
You don't have to push an SDK, but you do have to provide some guidance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but on one hand, we have this API where a provisioner can say, "Hey, here is the contents of a file that now should be exposed at .aws/config" or something along those lines. An application that is not Cozy aware will just work. If we have green and blue, then an application that is not Cozy aware will not just work. It will need to be reconfigured.
I mean, even if you have green and blue, what gets presented to the pod is still the same file. It's just the token is changed after a certain amount of time.
Yes, okay, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So the question still remains. So actually, based on what Guy was saying about blue and green, I think he's right in that we don't invalidate. So let's say we start with blue and then we upgrade to green, or we change we refresh to green. There should be a point in time where both are active.
Where both are valid, yes.
Yes. If we do it that way, then we avoid this pod crashing scenario.
Right. We just need to have the window, for having these both valid long enough for the for our applications to reload. That's kind of where the guidance is, or the SDK. It doesn't matter how you put it, right? Needs to be there in order to say this is like we might have a field within the token file saying refresh expiry like the other tokens, and then if you read the guidance saying you should refresh based on this field, which the driver provided you with, then you know that your driver will keep your previous one valid for enough time.
Yes, but we would still need to make sure that the various pods that consume the BA don't decide to restart themselves at roughly the same point in time.
No, we're saying there won't be that kind of restart.
Due to error? You mean due to permission error?
No, if you have an application which is unable to reload the authentication credentials, it reads them at startup. So this is not the long running up. It reads them at startup and then it just uses them.
Okay. Right. Then that application is not Cozy compatible at that point yet. Like.
Well, it is compatible, but it doesn't support seamless token refresh. That's the reality of the description of what the application supports, right?
Right.
Indeed.
So you're saying for that matter, we want rolling update of that somehow.
Well, so the problem now is that and we have multiple instances of this pod running, and they're all using the same token. Then if a token expires, I mean, if we wait for we recreate a new token behind the scenes, and we remap that new token into the file system as observed by the pod somehow, but the application doesn't see that new token, then at some point in time, the old token is invalid, and all instances of that application now error out and need to be restarted. But that happens at the same point in time, so there is service disruption.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. We're saying such an application is not fully Cozy compatible, or it's not compatible with refreshing tokens. So
the question is maybe what do we do? What can we suggest to these workloads other than
don't use refresh until you upgrade your application?
No, what you can have, for example, if the pod is managed by a replica set or actually a deployment, then we can trigger a rolling upgrade of the deployment.
But that's an assumption we can't make.
You can know that a pod is managed by a replica set, and a replica set is owned by a deployment, right?
Well, but any type of pod can request a bucket. It's not just something that does rolling upgrade.
Of course, but we can also, for built-in types, be somewhat more intelligent.
I think no. I think that's that. See, sometimes adding that intelligence, turns out to be counterproductive, because one, we're not solving all use cases, and two, they regardless have to update the application. by adding this complexity, we're actually just shooting ourselves in the foot, because
why do they need to update the application?
In order to work with refreshing credentials.
I have a suggestion, maybe. When we specify for a pod, right, the volume that it mounts, the cozy volume for credentials, perhaps we can mark that volume when it mounts it, whether that pod will need to be recreated when the volume. So say maybe the mount is read-only, maybe something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Just saying, if I mount this as read-only, I expect to be restarted when the change happens, because I cannot expect anything else. But if I mounted, not read-only, well, I'm not sure if read-only is the term, but something, right? Yeah. From the volume point of view, what is my pod expectation from this volume?
Right. So you're saying that so that whoever is deploying knows what to expect.
Well, that's kind of a spec that deployment can provide for a pod that doesn't support reloading, right?
But we then still need to stagger the restarts in.
But the deployment will do that once you kill the. So, well, let me think about this.
No, I don't think. See, we should not be solving problems at that level yet. So because if we get into that business of staggering restarts based on for refresh tokens, it actually doesn't guarantee that things will work fine, just because you restart at different points in time. I think for refreshing, we shouldn't even be restarting the pods. For instance, like the workloads using the bucket may not even be ones that work well for restarts. Again, we're making the assumption that all the state is in object storage, nothing is local, for this restart methodology to even work.
No.
So this is an actual. This is an actual problem that when I was at Rancher Labs, we solved for Coinbase. Coinbase was using a particular Linux OS. That every time there was an upgrade there was an automated upgrade every few days, and Coinbase couldn't even prevent things from restarting. They didn't want restarts to happen. They would rather have old code or old versions of whatever packages and not lose availability. Even if it meant some packages were not updated right away. So
don't get me wrong. Any type of automated restart would need to be opt-in.
Right, that's what we're saying exactly. So if you don't want to have automated restarts, I mean, in the sense, as much as possible, we should completely avoid automated restarts. And if you don't want to have them for your current applications, don't ask for credentials that have this refresh tokens in them, like this refresh logic or this refreshing thing happening for them. Just use permanent credentials until you upgrade your application such that it can deal with refreshing tokens.
And that sits in the bucket access clause.
Yes.
That seems very reasonable.
Okay. All right, we're out of time. I have a meeting at 11, but I think we should continue this discussion. I don't think we've come to a conclusion yet, but that's okay. So next week, what I'll do on Monday, we're going to have our office hours again. So I'm going to be doing a demo at that point. And before that, though, I'll bring up this topic. I'll have some diagrams drawn up for this, so it's a little easier to follow and understand. And we'll go from there.
Is there anything in the current update of the CAP for bucket access?
Well,
does it touch on that?
No. This is a topic. This is a question that we thought of only on Monday. So,
okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at this as more of kind of post alpha. But we can decide that as we move forward.
Right. But we should know at least if we want to set the APIs beforehand. Right.
I need to excuse myself. I won't be able to join any of the calls next week.
Oh,
Sorry.
we'll record everything. So yeah, we'll share it on the SIG Storage Cozy channel.
Yeah, I'll sync with Vianney as well, who should be able to join.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Sounds good.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye,
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, Shing, if you're there, we can stop recording now.